The night before Thanksgiving, 2021. It was a cold evening, but inside the small bar in the quiet town of Farmersville, Illinois, the air was filled with laughter. People were celebrating the approaching holiday with good food, drinks, and even better company. In the midst of this, two strangers were about to meet, their paths crossing for the first time, unaware that their lives would be forever changed in the hours to come. Leslie Reeves, a 45-year-old mother of two, had met Chris Smith, a 48-year-old pool contractor, through an online connection. Chris was an outgoing man, a musician who played in a local band. They had decided to meet up for a casual date on this chilly evening, hoping for a connection that could turn into something more. What seemed like a simple first date was about to spiral into something far darker. As the evening went on, Leslie sent a quick text to her best friend around 10 p.m. "Everything's going fine," she said. It was a simple message, a quick check-in. But then another text came just moments later, a cryptic message that seemed to carry a sense of unease. Leslie had written, "I feel like something's a little bit off. Not sure what." Those would be the last words her friend would ever hear from her. Minutes later, the night took an unexpected turn. Chris and Leslie stood up, ready to leave the bar. What began as an evening of fun and laughter was now a silent prelude to a deadly encounter. They stepped out into the cold, unaware that danger was waiting for them just around the corner. As they walked into the night, the quiet streets of Farmersville offered no hint of the horror that would soon unfold. Little did they know, this was not just a simple night out. It would be a night they would never leave behind. As the clock ticked past midnight, the small town of Farmersville lay in a deep slumber. The peaceful night was shattered only by the sound of Nanette Steiber's car engine, her heart racing as she drove towards a house she hoped would hold no surprises. Nanette had tried calling Leslie all morning. She hadn't heard back. She knew something was wrong. What was supposed to be a fun night had taken a terrifying turn. As she reached the address, her stomach churned with dread. With her hands shaking, Nanette got out of the car and approached the house. She could feel the unease building in her chest. Something was wrong, and she could feel it in the air around her. She rang the doorbell. No answer. She knocked. Silence. Every instinct in her told her to leave, but she couldn't. She had to know what had happened to her friend. A chilling feeling settled in her bones as she noticed the broken glass of the back door. As she walked around to the back of the house, Nanette's heart stopped. The back door was shattered, and the scene inside was chaotic. Furniture overturned, glass everywhere. A brutal force had been exerted here. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped inside. The kitchen was a scene of utter devastation. Blood spattered across the walls. The refrigerator had been pulled out of place, and a burnt pizza sat forgotten in the oven. But there was more. Far more. Then she saw it. Chris Smith, the man Leslie had been on a date with, was lying motionless on the floor. Blood pooled around him, and he appeared unconscious, barely alive. Panic set in as Nanette rushed back to her car, her heart pounding in her chest. She called 911, her voice frantic as she explained the situation to the dispatcher. She had to know, where was Leslie? As the police arrived, the scene unfolded with even more horror. Leslie was nowhere to be found, and Chris, barely clinging to life, was rushed to the hospital. Under the flashing red and blue lights, Chris was wheeled out on a stretcher, his body covered with a sheet. The question echoed through the night, where was Leslie? Early the next morning, the peaceful town of Farmersville awoke to the terrifying aftermath of the previous night. The sun rose over a town forever changed. A scene of horror had unfolded behind closed doors, and now the police had their work cut out for them. The investigation into the brutal assault had begun. Crime scene investigators scoured the house for clues, carefully cataloging every detail. Blood spattered across the kitchen floor, and glass from the shattered windows was scattered in every direction. The evidence of a violent struggle was everywhere. This wasn't just a random act of violence. Someone had been looking for something, or someone. Lead investigator Josh Easton, with over 1,800 crime scenes under his belt, approached the kitchen carefully. The sight before him was nothing short of horrific. Blood covered the walls, the refrigerator had been moved, and a burnt pizza sat in the oven. This wasn't just a simple break-in gone wrong. This was personal. As Easton surveyed the scene, he noticed the most telling signs of the struggle. Furniture thrown across the room, broken glass everywhere. The blood stains on the walls and the floor told a violent story. Then, near Leslie's body, a silver-colored bullet casing was found, one of two casings at the scene. It was a chilling sign. Someone had used a 9mm gun. The evidence began to paint a clearer picture of what had transpired. Chris and Leslie had tried to defend themselves, pushing furniture against the door, desperately trying to stop someone from entering. But it was too late. The assailant, armed with a 9mm, fired through the door, hitting Chris in the head. And that's when Leslie fled to the living room, hoping to hide from the madness. Leslie's body was found in the living room, a single gunshot wound to the head. The brutality of the crime was undeniable, and Chris, barely alive, would be the only one who could provide crucial answers. But he couldn't remember anything. The violence had left him with no recollection of the events that had transpired. Chris was rushed to the hospital, his condition critical. Doctors fought to save his life, but his injuries were severe. He was placed in a medically induced coma. It was unclear if he would survive, but even if he did, the memories of that night were locked away in his mind, perhaps forever.
Hi, I'm Leslie from All You Studio, and
Leslie posted this video to her YouTube channel to advertise one of her classes.
Empower yourself against aggression and assault as we teach you easy-to-learn self-defense techniques. Power up!
Days passed, but the case seemed to be stuck in limbo. With no clear suspects and no solid leads, the investigators were beginning to feel the weight of the case pressing down on them. The silence of the small town was now pierced by the hum of police radios, the sound of officers calling for help, and the constant shuffle of paperwork. But then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. It came from a phone call, a name that had popped up earlier in the investigation. Bobby Tarr, Leslie's ex-boyfriend, was becoming a key figure in the case. A friend of Leslie's, who had heard rumors about Bobby's violent past, contacted the police, suggesting that he might know something about the crime. Bobby Tarr was called in for questioning. His demeanor was calm, almost too calm. As the detectives sat across from him, the tension was palpable. He denied any involvement, but his answers were vague. There were inconsistencies in his statements, and it was clear that something wasn't right. Bobby claimed he was home the night of the murder, but the detectives had evidence to the contrary. His daughter, Shelby, told them a different story, one that contradicted Bobby's version of events. He had left the house twice that night, a fact that was quickly becoming critical.
You and Leslie have a lot of problems. I wouldn't say no worse than any average couple. I want you to dig down deeper and be as honest with me as you can, okay? Leslie is dead. What? Can you help me shed some light on this? How did she die? She was murdered. What happened? That's why we're here with you. You help me believe that you're not involved in this. I'm not involved in anything.
While searching Bobby's home, investigators found a Glock pistol. However, this wasn't the weapon they were looking for. They needed to find the 9mm gun used in the shooting. The pressure was mounting, but they knew they were getting closer. The breakthrough came when surveillance footage from a gas station showed Bobby's car leaving his house just after midnight, the time frame of the shooting. His car was seen driving toward the area near the crime scene. The investigators now had concrete evidence of his movements. When confronted with the footage, Bobby's story began to unravel. He had been caught in his lies. The investigators pushed harder, and Bobby's defenses crumbled. Finally, he admitted to being in the area, but he still denied being involved in the murder. Then came the discovery that would seal Bobby's fate. Investigators found the 9mm pistol buried in his yard, just days after they had already searched the area. The gun matched the bullet casings found at the crime scene, and it had Bobby's fingerprints on it. Bobby was arrested and charged with the murder of Leslie Reeves and the attempted murder of Chris Smith. The case was far from over, but the investigation had reached a pivotal moment. Bobby's lies and actions were finally catching up with him.
Arrest for murder.
Months after the brutal killings of Leslie Reeves and the near-fatal attack on Chris Smith, the case has finally made its way to the courtroom. Bobby Tarr, now facing charges of first-degree murder and attempted murder, sits quietly, his expression betraying little. The trial would be the final step in the search for justice for Leslie and Chris, but as the proceedings began, it became clear this wouldn't be an easy fight. The prosecution opened with a powerful statement, presenting the case against Bobby Tarr as a cold, calculated act of violence. They described how he had stalked Leslie, watched her from the shadows, and when he couldn't bear seeing her with another man, he decided to take matters into his own hands. The evidence, they argued, was overwhelming. The defense, however, painted a different picture. They argued that Bobby Tarr's involvement in the case was purely circumstantial, based on rumors and lies. There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene, they claimed. No fingerprints, no DNA. The only thing they had was a series of coincidences, they argued, and that wasn't enough to convict him. The prosecution then revealed the key piece of evidence, the murder weapon, the 9mm gun that had been found buried in Bobby's yard, the same gun that matched the bullet casings found at the crime scene. The prosecution argued that this piece of evidence was irrefutable, and it proved beyond a doubt that Bobby was the killer. Throughout the trial, Bobby's confidence began to crack. His defense was faltering as the prosecution presented more and more compelling evidence. The case seemed to be building toward a dramatic conclusion, but Bobby still denied his involvement, sticking to his story. He claimed he was innocent, that he hadn't killed Leslie or shot Chris. Then came the most emotional moment of the trial. The survivor, Chris Smith, was called to testify. For the first time since the attack, he was in the same room as the man accused of trying to kill him. His voice trembled as he described the night of the shooting, but when asked if he could identify the man who did this to him and Leslie, he nodded. The weight of his words hung in the air. The prosecutor's closing argument was compelling. She spoke of justice for Leslie, justice for Chris, and the truth that had been uncovered through meticulous investigation. The jury listened carefully, knowing that the fate of a man's life and the quest for justice was in their hands. The jury deliberated for hours, the weight of the evidence hanging heavy in the room. Finally, the decision was made. Bobby Tarr was found guilty of the murder of Leslie Reeves and the attempted murder of Chris Smith. The room erupted into a wave of emotion as justice was served. For Chris, the trial was not just about justice. It was a moment of closure. He had survived the unthinkable, and now with Bobby Tarr behind bars, he could begin to heal. But the pain of that night, the trauma, would stay with him forever. Months have passed since the trial, but the scars left by that night will never fully fade. Chris Smith, now a survivor, sits quietly in the park, reflecting on his journey, the pain, and the strength that came with surviving such an ordeal. He is a man who has been through hell, but he's slowly learning to find peace in a world forever changed by the violence he witnessed. Physically, Chris is still recovering. His body is scarred, a constant reminder of the brutality he endured. But it is his will to survive, his strength to keep moving forward that has inspired those around him. His family and friends have been his anchor, lifting him when he couldn't stand on his own. He has fought through countless hours of pain and physical therapy, but his mind is still a battlefield. As for Bobby Tarr, his fate has been sealed. He sits in a prison cell, his world now confined to the cold, lifeless walls. The man who thought he could control everything, who believed he could get away with murder, is now paying the ultimate price. Justice, though delayed, has been served. But for Bobby, there is no peace, only the consequences of his actions. Chris is not the same man he was before the shooting. The person he was, full of laughter and carefree joy, has been replaced by someone stronger, more cautious, but also more aware of life's fleeting nature. He still struggles with the trauma of that night, but he has also found ways to move forward. It's not easy, but each day is a small victory. His healing is a journey, and though the road is long, Chris is determined to keep moving forward. As Chris looks toward the future, he's finding strength in his family. He is a father, a son, and a survivor. While the past will always be a part of him, he's slowly reclaiming his life, piece by piece. His story is one of survival, resilience, and ultimately hope. Chris's journey is far from over, but the road ahead holds new possibilities. He has faced unimaginable darkness, and yet he continues to move forward, not just for himself, but for the people he loves. His story is a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there is always the possibility of healing. The darkness of the past may never fully fade, but with each new day, there is a chance to heal, to move forward. Chris Smith stands here today, not as the man who was attacked, but as the man who survived, who fought against the odds and came out stronger. The road to recovery is long and the scars are still there, but he is no longer defined by what happened to him. He is defined by how he chose to rise from the ashes. Through all the pain and fear, Chris has found something powerful: hope. It hasn't been easy, but with the love of his family and the determination to rebuild, he's created a new life for himself. His daughter has been a symbol of strength, and together they are building a future where the past no longer holds them captive. Chris is now learning to embrace the quiet moments, the small victories in life that once seemed insignificant. He's rediscovering joy in the simplest of things, whether it's spending time with his daughter or watching the sunrise in silence. For the first time in a long while, Chris is at peace, truly at peace with himself and the life he is rebuilding. Chris has started to write again, not to relive the past, but to create a future. Each word he writes is a small step toward his own healing, a healing not just of the body, but of the mind and spirit. In this new chapter of his life, Chris is finally taking control, finding his voice again, and reclaiming the parts of himself that he thought he had lost. The road to healing is long, but for Chris, each step forward is a triumph. His journey has been one of unimaginable loss, but also one of profound resilience. The story of Chris Smith is not one of despair, but of hope, courage, and the strength to overcome. And as the sun rises on a new day, Chris knows that while the past will always be a part of him, it no longer defines who he is. He is moving forward, and the future is full of possibilities. Sometimes the greatest triumphs come not from defeating others, but from conquering ourselves. Chris's journey is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure, to heal, and to rise again. This is his story. The past has shaped Chris Smith into the man he is today, but it does not define him. As the sun sets on this chapter of his life, he is finally ready to embrace the new beginnings that await him. This house, this life he's building, is more than just a home. It is a symbol of everything he has overcome and everything he still hopes to achieve. For Chris, this house represents more than just bricks and mortar. It represents healing. It represents moving forward, making new memories, and most importantly, it represents the love and resilience of the family that has stood by his side through everything. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's his journey to shape, and he's determined to make the most of it. Inside this house, Chris sees more than just four walls. He sees the future. He sees the possibility of laughter, the sound of footsteps running through the hallways, and the warmth of family dinners. It's not perfect, but it's his. And that, for Chris, is enough. Chris has finally found the peace he so desperately sought. The healing isn't complete. There are still days of struggle, moments of doubt, but each day brings him closer to the man he wants to be, the father he wants to be, and the person who has learned to live with his past without letting it control his future. Life is never without its challenges, but Chris has learned that the key to survival is not just in facing those challenges head on, but in finding the strength to move beyond them. His story is one of loss, yes, but it is also one of hope, love, and the power of human resilience. This is the end of one story, but the beginning of another. The story of Chris Smith is far from over, and though the past may never fully disappear, he has found a way to live with it, to let it shape him into something greater. A survivor, a father, a man who has learned to live again.